Okay, so in this video, we're going to cover why directory platforms like Checkatrade are holding you back from growing your plumbing business. A lot of plumbers are sick and tired of relying either on word of mouth or platforms like Checkatrade. Word of mouth, you can't really scale a business on word of mouth. You have no control over most things about it. And platforms like Checkatrade, they do offer a way out, but a lot of plumbers actually have an even worse experience there. So what do? We're going to cover why these platforms hold you back, and hopefully that helps you make better decisions for your plumbing business. So if we jump into it, as you can see, we've got a few diagrams, and word of mouth is basically unknown for everything. You have pretty much no control over any aspect of it, how often it comes, what kind of jobs you get. And then platforms like Checkatrade are a little bit better. You get a little bit high volume of predictable leads. The predictability is still mostly based on the platform, and the control is still low. There isn't much you can change. You can pay more, you can pay less. A lot of the time, it doesn't really make a difference. Okay, so now we're looking at the main problems of these platforms. So platforms like Checkatrade are not doing anything special. They're not generating leads out of thin air. They're not running some secret system. They gain their leads from Google just like everyone else. Almost 98% of customers go to their browser to search for local businesses. Homeowners go to Google, they type in plumber near me, they click something. Sometimes that's a directory, sometimes that's a website, sometimes it's a Google business profile. Checkatrade is not the source of demand, Google is. That means the total number of leads available starts with Google. Then directories take a slice, My Builder takes a slice, Rated People take a slice, every other platform takes a slice. What you're accessing is not the full market. You're accessing a fraction of that market. And now it gets worse. That fraction gets split again because you're not the only plumber on these platforms seeing that lead or paying for it. So it gets distributed to multiple tradesmen, sometimes 5, sometimes 10, sometimes more. You're competing for a small fraction of the total leads with a large number of plumbers. And this isn't really an opinion, it's how these platforms work. So it's a small portion split amongst many. And here's the worst part. The platform gets paid whether you win or not. So their revenue comes from selling leads. Yours comes from the actual jobs and profit. These are not the same incentives. So if 10 plumbers receive the same lead, the platform can monetize on that lead multiple times. If you don't win the job, you still paid and the platform still earned. Your outcome doesn't determine their revenue in the same way it determines yours. So that's the main bottleneck of any lead platform. It's just how it works, and because of that structure, the ceiling is built in. You only get access to a small fraction of total leads. You don't control how those leads are distributed, and you have to compete with others on that small slice of the pie. You're essentially playing Russian roulette every month if you get leads and if your business will make it through. And no matter what changes, these platforms will always only get a fraction of all the work because that's objectively how it works and where they're getting their work from. So your entire business is essentially operating inside someone else's funnel, and that funnel was not built to prioritize your growth. It was built to sell as many leads as possible to as many people as possible. So it was built to make money from the demand, not to grow your business. And that's a big difference if you're trying to scale. As long as leads keep coming in from Google, these platforms will have someone to sell them to. Tradesmen tend to join these platforms at a higher rate than they tend to leave. So you're just going to see more and more tradesmen every year. And these platforms will just keep selling the leads and the price will keep going out and it's just going to keep repeating. So that's the main problems. In the next section, we're going to cover the other problems that people typically face. Okay, so let's move on to the other problems that people face on these platforms. So the first ones are kind of the main ones. Those are the kind of fixed ones that won't change because the nature of these platforms and how they work fundamentally won't change either. These other problems more come down to how people actually experience the platforms. Like they could be better, but a lot of the time they're not, or common problems that they have which really hold them back. So one of the most common complaints isn't just competition, like your leads get sold to basically a bunch of other plumbers. It's the feeling that you're wasting time and money, because you pay for a lead, you call, and there's no answer. Or the customer's collecting five quotes and going with the cheapest option. Sometimes they've already chosen someone before you even get through to them. Either way, you've paid. So if you don't win the job, that can make it frustrating. And what makes it even more frustrating isn't just losing the job, is that you're paying someone just to be rejected. So you're basically paying someone to reject you, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. You absorb the cost whether it converts into an actual job or not, while the platform has already made its money. You know, they've sold the lead. Hey, ring faster, get more reviews. When that keeps happening, most tradesmen respond the same way. They assume the fix is to lean in harder. You know, "Oh, if I had more reviews, if I had more jobs under my belt, or more social proof like pictures and time spent on this platform, if only I upgraded the membership, if only I improved my profile, the key seems to be to put in more effort. The logic makes sense. In most businesses, the effort compounds. The more reputation you build, the stronger your position becomes. But inside these platforms, that relationship isn't linear. And as you can see here, you can get more reviews, you can complete more jobs, etc. Everything goes up. And yet the problem continues because on these platforms, you will find that another business with fewer reviews and less history gets access to a similar volume of work. And that could be because they're on a different tier. It could be because of different rules. It could simply be how the distribution on that platform is set up via the algorithm. And that's where it starts to feel unstable, because these platforms don't really operate for a fair judgment. They kind of operate through automated systems based on categories, ranking rules, and algorithms, which decide who appears where and when. You're not being individually assessed and rewarded. You're being processed inside a framework where the goal is to sell a lead to as many people as possible while making sure as many people stay on the platform as possible. And some cases that you see of tradesmen, where they build up a really strong profile over years with hundreds of reviews, like Terry here, and a very long time committed to being on these platforms, and all of a sudden their leads drop to zero. If they were bad before or they had some rough months, it just drops off to zero. And these issues are really annoying to face on these platforms because, like we mentioned earlier, you'd expect things to work in a linear fashion. The more reviews you get, the more rewarded you should get. The more time you spend on these platforms, the bigger the reward. Same with how much you pay and how long you pay for. But these problems pop up, sometimes it's a categorization issue, sometimes visibility changes after platform update, and sometimes the reason isn't obvious at all, but the outcome is the same. When something shifts inside their system, your calendar is the one that feels the impact. And when that happens, you don't have any leverage if that's kind of the main method you depend on. You can make a complaint to these platforms, but ultimately you don't control the traffic source and you don't control their distribution. And what it comes down to is whoever controls the traffic controls the flow of the work. So this isn't really about attacking a specific platform. It's just about understanding the leverage and risk working with these platforms. And when your pipeline depends entirely on something you don't control, you carry the risk. If work drops because of system change or algorithm update, there is no compensation, there is no guarantee, no safety net, the leads just disappear. And as we can see here, this is kind of the distribution we're talking about of, your effort in terms of reviews and time invested into a specific platform over time and the amounts of leads you get. You think that if you had 300 reviews, surely you would get way more work than everyone else. But unfortunately, on these platforms, it looks a bit more linear, not linear, just flat, where you might have 300 reviews, but you still have months where you don't get any work, and it just kind of doesn't correspond to how much time and money you've invested, and that can just be super stressful and really suck. So effort and reward are not directly connected on these platforms. And that kind of makes sense because, these platforms, they need to kind of sell that guarantee that if you upgrade to a higher tier, they can get you more leads, and they need to promise to new tradesmen that they can do that as well. So they're constantly trying to find the balance to give work to these people too. And by the end of it, no one really wins. So it's not a good solution for anyone. And the real question becomes, why build a business you really care about on a foundation that you can't control in any way? So as we've just covered on these platforms, reviews and more time invested and more effort invested does not always equal more rewards. So although they say reviews are essentially the main way you can stand out, because when a customer searches, all they see are your business names, profile photos, and ratings. As we've covered, it's not that simple to just focus on reviews and make it that rating go up. And with the reviews, there's actually a much deeper issue, which most plumbers and most businesses on these platforms don't understand, potentially until they've had to actually face it themselves. The reviews you collect on these platforms don't really belong to you in a meaningful way. They live inside that platform's ecosystem. So if you decide to leave, you don't take that authority with you. You don't take that social proof with you. You leave it behind. If you decide to hit cancel on that subscription, okay, yeah, they won't delete them, but they won't show them. Your profile isn't active anymore. So those 200, 300 reviews you collected for years, and now the leads have dried up. Cool. Like, it's not useful for anything anymore. It only benefits that ecosystem. And I feel like with a lot of businesses, what happens is you're hooked in with the offer of automatically collecting reviews from customers, but that convenience also keeps you attached and invested. Years of jobs, years of effort locked inside someone else's system. So that kind of creates the hesitation because leaving feels like going back to zero if you decide to try doing it a different way. And as you can see, this is basically an example of someone that would be facing that. So gain more reviews not only does it not guarantee more work, but if you stop paying, you stop showing. So not all reviews online carry the same way, and the reviews on Checkatrade, even if they are sharing for you, how much weight do they actually have? And on platforms like this. So after years of experience and, you know, just by the way that search engines work and all these different algorithms, there's a clear hierarchy. So at the bottom, you've got a platform like Facebook. No one really collects reviews here, and no one really interacts with the business pages either. It's not that common that you look up plumber near me or an emergency plumber and you scroll down to see the Facebook link. Then you've got the directories. So these reviews, they do help you inside of the ecosystem, but they don't really help your wider authority online. Common places for tradesmen. The reviews have a small influence over Google rankings and an AI. But your actual profile with the reviews doesn't actually index when people search for plumber in X town. If you actually take a look, a lot of the time it's just the Checkatrade main website for that town. So again, it just goes to show how your profile on there is even less worth anything it was worth. And then you've got the review platforms. So these are trusted sources of reviews because they're specifically designed for collecting reviews, and they also have a small influence over Google rankings and getting picked up by AI. And the last platform for reviews is Google. So the most important reviews you can have is actually on Google itself. They have the biggest impact for your business in your local area, and it helps you with a bunch of other things. So like the benefits stack, instead of with these platforms where like it's really just cons. Like you're gonna lose out on things. The benefits here stack. Like they help you get found in maps more often, which directories and Facebook reviews, they never show up in maps because they're not worth that much. And they help you on your website. you can link them to your website, and they also make your website stronger, so your website shows up higher too. Google has also very strict regulations and policies on these profiles because they have the infrastructure, they have the money to actually make these systems accurate and trustworthy. Because if search quality declines, users will leave, and if users leave, the entire model suffers. So that's why they're so much stricter. And local listings require a verification process, and why their reviews carry so much more weight. When someone searches for a plumber locally, Google reviews directly influence what shows up and how trustworthy your business looks. So they're kind of like the gold standard for local searches, and that's just how local search works. The key difference here isn't just about collecting reviews. It's more about each review being a tangible asset for your business. So it's something that your business earns over time through real jobs and real customers, and you can't just buy that trust. Like fake reviews on Google, they don't get very far. If you think you're going to get away with fake reviews, then go for it. It's very difficult to get away with fake reviews. I don't recommend it. Google will most likely catch up to you. When your profile gets suspended, you can say bye bye to all of your hard work. But for some businesses, 300 reviews, like we've covered in these examples, is like 5 years of work. So that isn't something you build overnight. And, of course, it should strengthen your position, make your business more valuable. You want that effort that you collect over the years in your business to compound. You want increased visibility. You want stronger authority to be built. You want to strengthen your system that you actually control and your business is powered by. If those reviews live inside a rented platform, their impact is mostly limited to that ecosystem. So it isn't just about getting reviews, it's about ownership and leverage over those reviews. If your reviews are on a platform, you're not strengthening your assets, you're strengthening theirs because all of the value is put into that ecosystem, which, as we covered, if you leave, you get nothing out of it. Thank you for your very hard work over the last 5 years. See you later. So it matters if you're trying to build something scalable and stable. And what's really sad is that, a lot of these businesses build up these 300 plus reviews thinking that something will eventually change at some point or click, and then the leads still drop off. And then it's like, whoa, how do you get those 300 reviews again? Well, it's not straightforward. So the reviews, the reason they're important is because they're basically used for two different things. So they're used by customers. Customers like to read reviews and they like to see social proof. And sometimes they'll go on multiple platforms to check for whatever comes up for your business. And they're also used by algorithms. Algorithms like to gather info from multiple sources. So like AI tends to check multiple directories, multiple review platforms for your reviews. And those sources affect your, search rankings and how often you show up in these AI tools. And they're both really just asking for the same thing. The homeowner is saying, I need to know if this is a trusted plumber to work with. And the AI is saying, I need to know if this is a trusted plumber to show other people. It's that straightforward. But it just goes to show how you don't want to lock yourself to a single platform and basically be left with an expression like that. Because it's going to cause a lot of problems and it's a very unfortunate circumstance to find yourself in. So cool. So hopefully you saw that this wasn't about criticizing one specific platform. It was mainly about understanding how these systems actually work, and it's about avoiding things like collecting 300 plus reviews only to realize that all that work made someone else's platform more valuable than your own business. If this video helps even one plumbing business avoid that mistake, then I think mission is accomplished. And your next steps, this isn't really about leaving these platforms tomorrow. They can be useful in the short term. They can fill gaps. They can help when you're starting out. The problem isn't using them. The problem is depending on them and falling into some of these holes. The overall thing is most plumbers end up on these platforms not because it's the best long-term system for them to grow their business. It's because they haven't been shown a better one. It seems like the only option for them. But there are systems out there that make it way easier to scale. A system where traffic, the reviews, and the visibility build your own foundation over time instead of someone else's. Because real growth does require ownership. It requires control over the assets that bring in your work. So that's what you got to consider. Ownership is the best way forward. And if this video helps one person understand that before going all in on the wrong strategy, then that's good enough. We're not going to have enough time to cover these systems in depth. This video took a lot longer than I expected, so I hope you didn't get like super bored of my rambling, but the points, hopefully you found them helpful, and I hope they helped someone. So real quick, if you do have any topics you struggle with and you want a video on that, just let me know what you're struggling with the most. If you want to get some more info outside of just one platform or Checkatrade and about what goes into some of these systems in a little bit more detail, I do have another guide, which you can watch that if you want. And if you want any specific advice for something that you're struggling with regarding marketing, SEO, Google Ads, Google Business Profiles, just gain more leads to your plumbing business, solving that acquisition problem, not relying on third-party platforms like Checkatrade, you can book a call. You don't have to. The option is there. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. And that's everything for today.